Hello and welcome to this webinar. This is Shane McGlynn of IRM UK, and today I'm joined by Malcolm Chisholm, who will be presenting on a new generation of MDM. This is part of our webinar series of the MDM and Data Governance Conference 2020, which will take place in London from the 2nd to the 5th of November. Malcolm presents a 2-day course on successful implementation of a master data management program with IRM in June and again in November. We welcome your questions via the questions pane. And now over to you, Malcolm.
Thank you very much, Shane, and thank you very much, IRM UK, for the invitation to present today. I'm coming to you live from Orlando, Florida, known as the happiest place on earth. I'm not sure if that's really true, but at least it's sunny here. So today we'll be looking at a new generation of MDM. And let me just advance the slides here. So why do we have a new generation of MDM? Well, MDM has been around for quite a time, and it has been particularly focused on a number of traditional drivers. In fact, I think we can say that MDM probably started towards the late 1990s and grew quite extensively in the first decade of the new millennium. The traditional drivers have been things like customer deduplication, probably the initial driver. MDM grew in part from what was called customer data integration. Hierarchy management, which for customers often involves householding, but is also an extremely important area for product master data management. Also, there's been some technical drivers in terms of IT support, such as speeding up the data supply to projects. If projects can new systems or new applications can be supplied with master data, it does speed them up. Data quality has also been an enormous driver for MDM. Data quality in terms of how we manage data. Some data quality improvements can be made just looking at the data itself. Others can be, other aspects of data quality can be improved by the processes that we have in MDM. The 360-degree view of customer has also been an important driver. The need to know everything about a particular customer, although I will say that can also be achieved in data warehouse architectures. And then speeding up manual processes. Those manual processes I referred to a moment ago that are connected with master data management need to be made more efficient, and that's also been a goal. So the reality has been that these traditional drivers have been really oriented to back offices and IT departments. And for executive management at the top of at least for-profit companies, those are often viewed as cost centers. They are areas in which, yes, there's a greater need for efficiency, and yes, we do need operational excellence, but they're not revenue generating units of the enterprise. And therefore, the sort of traditional justification for master data management has been kind of less appealing to executive management than if it were somehow to increase revenue. So that's the background. But MDM is changing. This traditional approach has started to evolve into, I think, something a little bit more exciting. And one of those changes is the specialization that we now see in master data management. Now, I want to distinguish between master data management per se and the MDM technology that supports it. We're not going to get too much into that today, but MDM technology is often talked about in terms of being single domain or multi-domain, meaning you can, a particular MDM technology can support different master data entities like legal entity, retail customer, product, etc., versus single domain where you'd have one technology that just supports one of those. That's fine. The technology is good. But MDM itself is becoming more and more domain specific in the sense that there's an art of understanding and managing different types of master data entities, and it's kind of unique. So if you look at legal entity as a master data entity, then there is an art to onboarding new corporate customers, or vendors or suppliers. That might include things like know your customer, anti-money laundering, politically connected persons, etc. And it's knowledge about those processes, not knowledge about the technology. Again, the technology is great, but it's knowledge about how you manage that stuff. Product's another one. How do you do product taxonomies? And the matching the processes around managing product data to the value chain of the product itself. Same with financial instruments like stocks and bonds. How do we get those in? And there the art is very much around rule making, which is to say that, for instance, if a bond or if a pricing feed arrives later than 15 minutes after a market close, do we use that pricing feed or do we switch to another one? So all of this very specific domain knowledge is becoming more and more important. And while the same technologies may be available, the implementations, when you consider the people and process side, is going to be very different. So we've seen the emergence of data experts for these different master data entities, and I think that's really upped the game in these various domains of master data management, and it's super interesting to see how that's evolved and how it's continuing to evolve. And I think that will only get more specialized. So if you want to work in master data management, you're going to have to master, as it were, the art of data in these particular domains. So, well, okay, we can see that MDM is becoming more specialized and richer and sort of built out in terms of the techniques around it. Other things are happening too. For instance, we start to see that we're getting a little bit away from the need to have static information about, say, customers and making sure that that's of high data quality. We're starting to see that profile information, in addition to static information, is also something that's important in customer MDM. And there's parallels in the other MDM entities, but I'll talk about retail customer here. So I think we're all pretty much familiar with e-commerce sites, and we get on one of those, and here I'm going to buy a funnel, and then I get suggestions about what other customers do. They buy similar products. So it's going to suggest to me that, okay, if you're buying product type X, here's what other people buy in addition to product type X. And you can take this further. We could look, if we could infer what kind of demographic you are, maybe if your customer profile is available on the e-commerce site because you've signed into it, then we can go a step further and think about what kind of information, what kind of products people in your demographic are buying, and the suggestions become increasingly personalized. And so that brings us to the promise of a new age of MDM-driven business. So we can go to the next level, which is to say we're going to put MDM in the heart of our business model. So now we've come very much further away from the original using MDM to increase operational efficiency, support the back office, support IT, which are cost centers, to the possibility that MDM can actually drive increased revenue, or in fact could be at the heart of your business model. And here's an actual example from although the picture is not the actual example, it's going to give you the idea of how this is going to work. So in the United States, there is a chain of what are called big box stores. Those are large warehouse-like stores for auto parts, meaning car parts, I guess, in the UK and Europe, where you can go in and buy anything you would like to buy to repair your car or service your car at home. It's for the car enthusiast to do that. So this particular company has segmented its physical locations into what are called micro locations. Now, not all store layouts in these big box stores are going to be the same. There are variations from store to store, but you will have, let's say, one place for exhaust pipes, another place for cleaning products, another place for lights for your car or motorcycle. Okay, those are my individual micro locations. And what the company has done is given its customers a mobile app, which you can initiate on going into the store, and it will guide you to where these particular micro locations are using a sort of in-store GIS or kind of Google Maps or Waze type approach. So you can walk to the places and find them pretty easily without having to ask a store associate. Also, the app can communicate back with the MDM hub, which contains not just your profile information, but also information about your past interactions with the company. And it can make recommendations to you, such as if you're walking out of the store, it might say, well, it's 6 months since your last oil change. Do you want to pick up some oil and an oil filter to do another oil change? So this is driving revenue. It's interacting with the individual. So you can see that this kind of experience, which is ultimately MDM driven, is becoming is indeed something which allows the company to generate more revenue and is fully integrated with the business model. It's no longer just a sort of technology add-on that's going to help us improve data quality in the bowels of the company someplace. Now, we can take this a little bit further and think about architecture. So how does MDM fit into all of this in maybe a more general way than I've just been describing for the one individual company? We have a customer who manages their profile online, and that goes into the master data hub, and the master data hub gets the static information about the individual. That's already an advance, in fact, because we've cut out the need for somebody else to do that data entry. Just having customers manage their own information is probably going to be a lot closer to the best source of truth, although there might be some questions sometimes about what they're entering. But in general, it creates that operational efficiency and drives up data quality. We then have various parts of the systems of the company that face off to the consumer. The e-commerce platform, the general company website would be examples of that. And clearly on the e-commerce platform, we can interact really well by driving information coming from that master data hub to help make personalized suggestions to the individual about what they might like to buy and try to drive up revenue. On the company website, I'm talking about just a general company website, we can also get information. But that might be about the way in which the consumer interacts with the website in generally. That might tell us some information about their preferences. And those kinds of interactions in general, I'm calling intelligent customer interactions. And the information isn't going directly back to the MDM hub, but it's going into a data lake where we can push it through advanced analytics. So I can tell from the pages within the company website that the customer is visiting, I can start to deduce something about them. I can maybe know about them, or if I'm really good, maybe I can predict something about them. So we really see the data lake driving advanced analytics, and those are the models that people can produce, the predictive models, where that's human-driven hypotheses, or today the advanced, more advanced machine learning aspects, where I feed in just what the customer does, I provide the machine with a whole bunch of variables about the customer, and then sit back while the machine sorts through all of those variables and figures out which ones, with what weightings, in what combination, predict the information that we see. And yes, that's a more black box approach. We don't know the causation. It's not driven by human-generated hypothesis, but nevertheless, it has some predictive power, although you have to watch those things because they can drift away from reality over time. And that goes back to update the Master Hub with some kind of information that helps us when the customer comes back again. Social media. We can mine social media for customer and frankly, some applications that are spyware on their personal devices, to understand also about what the customer is doing outside of interactions with the company website. So that goes in too. Then the customer going into a bricks and mortar store and interacting in there. Again, we can trap that. And then finally, the company itself can have its own app on a mobile device, and we're not truly at the point where we can understand what the customer's doing yet. I think that because of bandwidth constraints, we have to wait for 5G to produce this much richer and deeper set of data about what customers are doing, and then that will be fed into cloud storage, back to the data lake, back to the advanced analytics or machine learning, and so on. So you can see that I think the point of all this is that we have to start thinking of MDM in the context of a much larger architecture. Okay, you want MDM to be important, you want it to drive business models. Okay, then it's not just a project, it's going to be fitted into this overall architecture that is very, very much coupled with the way that the company's doing business. So you get what you wish for in terms of MDM, but it's going to be a much more complex overall architecture, and I think complex in a good way, that has to be dealt with. So it's not just saying I'm going to slap in an MDM solution to deduplicate customers because I sent out 2 catalogs to the same person instead of just 1. Now, going beyond that, we have privacy, and I'm going to again just stick with the customer, and we can't go into all the MDM entities today, but customer data privacy compliance is going towards personalization as a result of this. And here's a study that you can look at from Accenture, which is indicating that the way in which we're going to manage personal information in the context of MDM is important. It's not just regulatory compliance. We tend to think of data privacy as regulatory compliance when individual customers, retail customers, interact with the company, but in reality, it's a competitive differentiator. Customers are going to abandon a company if they don't feel that company can be trusted with their personal information, which is fine. I think that's understandable, and that gets to kind of the spirit of the data privacy laws. But the company, what customers are really expecting, in addition to the trust factor, is that they're going to get a personalized experience. So it's not just the executives who are thinking about how MDM can help us generate more revenue. Individual customers are willing to provide their personal information if they get personalized service. They expect personalized service. So there's a demand, there's a pull as well from the retail customers, and that's different to MDM of the past. So that's something else we have to bear in mind. And this is just a diagram of how you might see the MDM hub fitting into this. It's a different viewpoint to the diagram I showed a little bit earlier. This is just thinking about it in terms of how does MDM fit into these other considerations that we have for personalization in order to drive this personalized customer experience that is now being expected. Another factor that we need to think about is relationships in master data. This is also an emerging trend. It's very often described in terms of, oh, you need a graph database. Because why? Because we're considering these relationships, and the relationships have to be flexible. Graph databases are not conceptually new. There were mainframe databases called network databases that were essentially provided the same kind of capabilities. Now, I'm not knocking the new technology, it's very good. The issue you have with this kind of approach is, what do the relationships mean? There's a bunch of lines, okay, fine. Those could be different relationship types. So the semantics and the ontology and how you govern those becomes important. It's not just saying, oh yes, this database allows you to have a relationship and to create that very, very easily. That's fine. You could easily create a giant mess with this very quickly, and that would be an expensive failure. So the relationships in master data have always been a challenge. I think that challenge is made easier by the emergence of graph databases, but the governance of the relationships and the semantics and the ontology are the really crucial issues here. So yes, this can support the new generation of MDM, but that's something that data professional, MDM professionals are going to have to master also. So what it means in general is that enterprise data architecture is becoming more important for MDM. MDM isn't a point solution. It's part of a whole, a very, very important part, a leading part. And so you can't think of it as just an isolated project. Knowledge about specific master data entities is becoming necessary. Understanding of processes and governance at MDM is becoming even more important. It always was, but it's becoming more important now. And again, it's going to be master data entity specific. And the ability to deal with the semantics of master data entities is, again, becoming more important. And again, it's master data entity specific. So those are a few takeaways for the new generation of MDM, which I think is super exciting. And at this point, I'll hand it back to Shane for any questions.
Thank you very much, Malcolm. And we have a few questions, please. First question. If MDM is as strategic as you say it is, can you do it as a project?
Okay, so I think ultimately things do break down into projects, and MDM probably today, if you're doing, if you're, trying to implement something in terms of the new generation of MDM, you're going to have one or more projects, but you're also going to have to deal with a lot of strategic discussions too. So it's got to fit into the enterprise architecture, it's got to fit into the business model. So you're going to have people who understand MDM be a voice at the table in those discussions. So if you get your strategy right on the technical, if you're doing your strategy well on the technical side and on the business side, then yes, it will spawn a project as part of a portfolio of projects. There's going to be a lot of business people and process that has to go around this. But the projects are no longer standalone technical implementations. They're just part of an overall suite of projects, all of which have to be coordinated and go well.
Thank you. One more question, please, Malcolm. You
Sure.
did not talk about data quality much. What is the relationship between data quality and MDM?
Right, so that's a bit trickier, Shane. So MDM technology has often built into it some degree of data quality capabilities. So that you typically get something there. Today, however, I think we see a group of well-formed data quality products which are out there in the marketplace that can be leveraged in addition to MDM tools. So you're going to have to decide kind of which way you want to go. Do you want to use the capabilities that might be inherent in the MDM tool you're using, even if that's homegrown, or are you going to acquire one of these sort of one of these tools that's really built for data quality? That's one. And then secondly, your processes. Are the processes that you have maybe the way in which people are interacting with the customers? Some of those processes that I mentioned, like customer onboarding, are those really well designed to drive up data quality, to check data quality and make sure that it's what we want it to be? I mean, accuracy, which is one of the dimensions of data quality, can only be achieved by making sure we have the truth about the master data entity, the product or the customer or whatever. And so it's not entirely a data question. So those processes then become also super important in data quality, and thinking about how to architect them, and also just govern with people. People, I think when it comes to MDM or data governance in general, I think there's been insufficient awareness or training because there never really was data governance units before. In terms, there was not this awareness of individuals that they're responsible for the data they produce. They don't understand it goes into a data supply chain that affects so many other things that they can't see. That sort of data literacy is also going to become important. So I think, yeah, we could go on about data quality in MDM for a long time. It's a complex subject. It takes it's going to take quite a number of efforts on different fronts to drive quality up.
Wonderful. Thank you, Malcolm. And perfect. We're ending on time. So thanks to everyone who joined the webinar, and a big thanks to you again, Malcolm.
Okay, thanks very much, Shane, and thank you, IRM, and to all the attendees today.